This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, hello, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, happenings in the world of international news, health, technology, entertainment, all of it, everything that we interact with every day on a weekly basis through perhaps news media or through perhaps the internet or however and wherever these days with smartphones and everything else. We are sort of inundated with these things, and we take a step back and we look at them from a higher perspective. So what do I mean by a higher perspective? Well, if you've been listening to the show, you understand. So bear with me while I explain again to those who may be tuning in for the very first time. This is a show where we take a metaphysical or spiritual approach to our daily lives and the things that inform our daily lives. And that includes news. That includes the news media. You know, many times people, particularly people who may be on a spiritual path, but even just everyday folks who just feel overwhelmed by the amount of information that is, you know, surrounding them 24/7 these days. They can quickly find themselves exhausted or just frustrated or just irritated and not knowing how to deal with those things. They'd rather just, you know, turn everything off, so they get to a point where they want to just disconnect from everything. And so you have the rise of these, disconnect vacations you may have heard about, where people go and no cell phones, no computers, nothing for a period of time, just to relax and chill out. And I think it works. I think it certainly is a healthy idea if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of these things. But, you know, after a week or 2 weeks, you're back to the same thing until it builds up to an unhealthy level again, and then you take a couple of weeks off. And it goes on and on like that. But there's a better way, I think. You know, I don't think that you have to, make a big deal or, arrange these disconnect vacations to be able to successfully deal with the information that technology brings and to deal with it in a healthy way. And the healthy way that I propose, in this podcast is by, taking that step back and understanding what this is. So in metaphysical terms, we are, and you may have heard, some spiritual teachers and self-help gurus and things like that make the statement that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Well, that's kind of it. From a metaphysical perspective, we are at our highest level, one. We are I guess you can call it divine mind. I like that term, divine being, what have you. But we create everything that happens in our mundane or everyday existence. We are playing at it like a game in a way. Because at our highest level, metaphysically, we are indestructible. We are powerful beyond all measure. We are one in all things. And we have no need of, things like fear, worry, weakness. None of those things are actual real things to the truth of who and what we really are. So what we do is we create ourselves, put ourselves in a space, create a version of ourselves that is the exact opposite of that gets confused or seems to get confused, that gets sick or seems to get sick, that is fearful or small or weak. And we create that. Why? We create that to experience those feelings. Because as we are in our true selves, we don't experience those things. So it's kind of the same impulse, on a much smaller scale, as to why we participate in video games for instance, or go to movies and experience stories that are not who we are, but that we connect to or relate to. I participate in a gathering of friends of mine and we play what we call RPG or role-playing games, which are games based on mostly science fiction series and movies like Star Trek and Star Wars. And we take on a character, and through rolls of the dice, we put ourselves in different situations and try to get ourselves out of these situations. And it's a lot of fun, and it's exciting and thrilling, and you get sort of the experience of being in these worlds, without actually being there. Well, in a way that's the analogy that I would draw here, is that we are participating in the ultimate role-playing game in our lives. And the exciting thing about this role-playing game, unlike, the role-playing games that I play with my friends, is that when I play with my friends, I don't forget who I really am. I know I'm playing this character, and I'm well aware that I'm playing this character. But when we involve ourselves in the greatest role-playing game ever, which is our lives, we do forget that. We think we're this character in this role-playing game. Or we can forget that. For most of us, I think in the back of our minds or somewhere deep inside, there's a ping reminding us, hey, you know what? This isn't really the truth of things. But quite often that ping gets drowned out completely by all of the stuff that's going on in the role-playing game. And so what's interesting, though, is that once you go into the elements of the role-playing game and you take the energy from them and you really go deep into it, that becomes clear. In other words, you begin to remember the truth of who you are. You begin to remember that you're in the midst of a role-playing game. And so that's the technique that you can use when things get overwhelming or scary or just seem too big to even contemplate. Perhaps your normal reaction would be to, shut it down, not think about it, try to turn it off, try to get away. But that doesn't really work, because the more you push it away, the stronger it becomes and the bigger it builds in your mind. So if you actually embrace it and go into it and feel the energy of it, feel the energy of whatever that story or situation is that may be just particular to you in your life, or it may be a broader news story in the news. Maybe you're terrified of Donald Trump becoming president. Go into that. Go into that. Visualize what that might be like and feel whatever you're feeling about it. Panic, fear, intimidation, and take those energies back. And as you take them back, remember the truth about it. Remember that this is an illusion. It's a role-playing game. And he's as much involved in role play as you are. And you've created these characters. around you, including him, to give you this feeling, to have this experience. And then you can look at it in a much different way. You can look at it from the perspective of, hey, this is a role-playing game I'm involved in. I don't know. I know there's rules. I got to play by those rules, and we'll see where this takes us. But I understand that I'm creating all of this. And then you can kind of eliminate the fear and the intimidation of it, and understand it for what it is. So, my goodness, I just spent 10 minutes explaining this concept to you, and I apologize for going on like that. But I think it's an important idea, and even if you are understanding and have listened to the show before, it's good to review those things. So, on today's show, you might have noticed the title is Health and Wealth in the Transition Era. Last week, I spoke about health and wellness in the transition era. The transition era being this period of time we're in right now, where things are changing rapidly. We are making incredible advancements in not only in technological space, but in our consciousness. And in this transition era, old ways are still around. They reassert themselves, but it's they are fading away as new forms take place. And so one of the areas, of course, is healthcare and health in general. And one of the things we talked about last week was the fact that, and there was an article about this in the Times, which talked about the research that showed an incredibly growing gap between those people who live in wealthier urban areas and those who live in poorer urban and rural areas, and how their health and life expectancy are radically different. People who are in rural and poorer inner city areas have less life expectancy in general than those who live in more affluent areas of the country. That's number one. Number two, this particular article was highlighting how middle-aged white women whose life expectancy has been, traditionally quite long, more than white men even, has been dwindling. And a lot of it is due to, again, the economic disparity, which brings us back to income inequality. So I wanted to talk about on this show the connection between health and wealth, and how that connection, in the case that I just cited, is quite a powerful one. But also, and as I said, this transition era isn't just a change of physical things, a change of technology and the way we do things. It's a change in how we see things, how we are aware of things. And as our idea of wealth and what that means changes, also our idea of health and what that means is changing too. So we're going to look at Mr. David Houle, who is a futurist, who is talking about and has written a book about the new age of health. And as a futurist, he takes a look. He's taking a look at very much at the physical and material side of what this means, how the delivery of healthcare is changing because of the great expense. Again, there goes that wealth-health connection, and how this is being changed by some very innovative approaches and innovative doctors, particularly one in India that we'll talk about. And we'll also talk about how our perception of what health is, and the term wellness. I mentioned this last week. How wellness is really changing how we see what health means. And that's all connected to our evolving consciousness, our evolving awareness of things, and the interconnectedness of everything. Suffice it to say that, the traditional point of view of health is, oh, I don't feel well. What medicines can I take to relieve those symptoms? Oh, I broke my arm, or I have appendicitis, I need surgery, or all of those things, which of course are quite important physical problems. But beside that, and looking at just curing symptoms and alleviating pain when it becomes to the point where it's too much. Wellness takes a look at everything and how it all interacts. So we're going to talk about the elements of wellness, and we're also going to talk about research in areas that have traditionally been completely ignored, shut down, or just laughed at by traditional science. Things like meditation and mindfulness, and how research is, number one, the fact that they are researching it at all seriously is changing how these things are thought of. So we're going to talk about all of that in the time we have left, and probably we'll have to do more shows on this because I'm sure we won't get to everything. But let's start by taking a look at what Dr. Houle, not Dr. Houle, he's a Mr., not a doctor, but he's a futurist, and he has written this book about how healthcare is going to change, and medicine is changing. As I said, it's called the New Age of Health, the Future of Healthcare in America, and you can get it on Amazon. It was actually published, looks like about 5 years ago. So what he says here, and this is an article that comes from his own website, David Houle, that's DavidHoule.com, and the colleague that he wrote this book with, and he says it was clear to us that certainly the United States and humanity globally were entering a new age of healthcare and medicine that we call the New Health Age. This new age would usher in transformational changes in healthcare and rapidly approaching medical miracles, and that the economics of healthcare would be turned upside down. We were clear that this would be a global phenomenon, and that it was important to look around the world to see where the future that would be the new health age was first appearing. Well, our research quickly pointed to a true visionary doctor in India. We realized this was significant due in part to the explosion in medical tourism around the world. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of this phenomenon, medical tourism is the idea that if you get sick, if you have cancer or you have a major illness, the expense in the United States healthcare is so expensive that you go to another country where perhaps you even get free care, or at least much less expensive care, and better care in many cases. And you take a little vacation, and you get well, and you come back, and it's still less than it would cost you to stay here in this country and have treatment. So this particular gentleman, Dr. Devi Shetty, and he's from Bangalore, India, began to open hospitals, specialized hospitals in India that catered to this. He leads a hospital called the Narayana Hrudayalaya. Yeah, forgive my awful pronouncing. Hrudayalaya. Narayana Hrudayalaya Hospital, where 42 cardiac surgeons performed 3,174 cardiac bypass surgeries. This was in 2008. And that's twice the cases, more than twice the cases, that were performed at leading U.S. medical centers that year. So he's performing more surgeries, charging an average of about $2,000 for open heart surgery. And then he began to build other hospitals in India as well. A 1,000-bed heart hospital for heart patients, a 1,400-bed cancer hospital, and a 300-bed eye hospital. And all of these facilities, they share the same laboratory, so that saves money. And it's a family-owned business. And they make a profit, apparently, according to this, 7.7% profit after taxes, which apparently is greater than the average for a U.S. hospital. So the criticism of this is that, well, it's easier for him to build those hospitals because it's much less expensive in India. So, to kind of fly in the face of that, he is building and has built hospitals in the Grand Cayman Islands, which is, Grand Caymans are part of the United States, actually. And he's building something he calls Health City. Now, you might have some concern about, what's the quality of care at places like this? Well, according to this, at the Narayana Hospital, there's a 1.4% mortality rate within 30 days of heart bypass surgery, which is one of the more common procedures there. And that is compared with 1.9% in the United States. So it's, even better than United States hospitals can offer. And, well, apparently, according to Dr. Shetty, he feels that this mortality rate would be even lower if it was adjusted for risk, because he says his patients are often sicker than the average U.S. cardiac patient because they've had more, it's been a longer time before they get to him. And he says many of these patients lack access to basic health care and suffer from more advanced cardiac disease before they finally have the surgery. So the point that Mr. Houle makes here is, and he's consistently made this point, he says that an American needing a heart bypass surgery could fly to India, have the surgery performed by one of Dr. Shetty's surgical teams, recover, have the family member accompanying them stay in a nice hotel for a month, and then fly back to America, and it would still cost less than going to one of the higher profile cardiac centers in the United States, and with a higher probability of living. And, of course, the reaction that he says is that, certain amazement at how overpriced and expensive U.S. healthcare was, but also that Dr. Shetty could do this because things are much cheaper in India. So now he's building on the Grand Cayman Islands, which are probably cheaper too, but not remarkably so. And he has a way of building these places which is, efficient, environmentally friendly, and there's a lot of detail that he gives here. I can't get into all of it right now. But this is a gentleman that he points to as being one of the leaders, or being on the forefront of this change that is going to happen in healthcare. So that's an interesting look at how healthcare might become more of a global phenomena, particularly since here in the United States, even with things like, the Affordable Care Act, people still are dealing with overpriced, healthcare. The Affordable Care Act is really nothing to rein in things like pharmaceuticals, or hospital charges, uh, all of that. It really does nothing to, to do that. The only thing it does is guarantee coverage for people, and still make the insurance companies major players in this. And because the insurance companies are still major players in this, that's why you have the expenses. So that's the transition I think that he's talking about. So quickly, let me now go over and talk about the new ways of, now that we know the new delivery and new approaches to healthcare that may begin to flourish now in this transition era. Let's talk about the way we look at health. What does it mean to be healthy? And for that, we turn to the word wellness. And as I mentioned in last week's show, that term itself wasn't even used 15, 20, 25 years ago. But now it is. And so we're going to look at this article that details 6 dimensions of wellness. And this was developed by a doctor named Bill Hetler, a co-founder of the National Wellness Institute, which is an organization formed to provide health promotion and wellness resources to doctors and individuals. So the model that they go on illustrates 6 different dimensions of wellness. That's intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, occupational, and physical. So, of course, physical wellness is the thing that we are, most familiar with. How does the body feel? Is it sick or injured? So, maintaining physical wellness, he correlates to getting regular physical activity, but even more importantly, it's what you eat. It's making sure you're eating, whole grains. It's making sure you're eating a variety of veggies and fruit. It's making sure that you're cutting down on dairy products, and that you're getting calcium from things like, broccoli and spinach. And choosing lean meat products, all of those things. And so maintaining that physical fitness allows you to, and supports the other areas, of wellness, intellectual wellness, for instance, creative and mental activities that, and openness to new ideas. So if you're intellectually well, you're trying to expand your knowledge and skills, and sharing knowledge and skills. This can be achieved by, getting involved in formal learning or informal learning, gathering in groups. You can take college classes, or you can, watch educational programming, stretching and challenging the mind through reading and research. All of those things point to intellectual wellness, and they've also been shown to, for instance, if you're, continually studying or learning new things, learning new tasks, maybe you're taking music lessons or whatever, that this also affects the brain physically, and gives you less risk of things like dementia, stroke, and so forth. And then you have emotional wellness. This gives you the ability to get through the slings and arrows of life, if you will. And some of these aspects include self-acceptance, self-confidence, self-control, and trust. Emotional wellness deals with all of these things, and it determines your ability to deal with stress, your ability to be flexible, and your attitude towards yourself in life. So to improve that, is a social support. That's an important part in maintaining emotional wellness. Social wellness, very similar kind of thing. Volunteering, getting involved, doing things. There's, together in clubs. There's a really neat website called Meetup.com where these different meetups happen, based on interests, and you can sign up and meet people that way and share common interests and so on. Spiritual wellness. This has to do with meditation. We'll get to that in a minute. Taking time out to do some meditation, change any negative self-talk through affirmations, reading inspirational things. If you are religious and you practice religion, get involved in that. You can practice breathing exercises like we talk about all the time on this show. Nature walks are awesome. And again, going back to exercise and diet, that's also part of taking care of yourself spiritually. And through creativity, singing, painting, drawing, find something that you like to do and, get involved. And then occupational wellness has to do with your career satisfaction, doing something that you really love. Choosing a career path that's compatible with your interests. And having strong relationships with your coworkers, really gives you a feeling of wellness at work. And since so much of our time these days is taken up with, the job, we spend more hours in the job than we do in any other part of our life. Wellness in that aspect of your life really is kind of important. So it's very interesting to look at those areas. Now, mindfulness is one area where a lot of research has been, taking place. And this research was published in the journal Psychiatric Research Neuroimaging. And it's focusing basically on what changes physically the brain goes through when mindfulness meditation is used. And the study correlates use of mindfulness meditation with measurable changes in the brain, in the areas that are involved in memory, learning, and emotion. And as we know, mindfulness meditation focuses attention on your breathing and to develop an awareness of the present. And research has shown that mindfulness meditation can reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, and even chronic pain. But this is looking at the effects on the brain of participants who were enrolled in an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And so they just looked at these people's brains, and then they looked at a control group of people, 17 non-meditators, over that same period of time. And those participants who were involved in the meditation group took questionnaires to find out, how they felt about what was going on, and inner experiences, outer experiences, and so on. So the brain images of the meditation group revealed increases in gray matter in the left hippocampus. And the left hippocampus is that area of the brain that's involved in learning, memory, and emotional control, as well as that feeling of elation or transcendence that you get through meditation or prayer. Those are all thought to be in that region of the brain. And gray matter also increased in 4 other brain regions in the meditation group. And the questionnaire responses indicated there were improvements in 3 of the 5 aspects of mindfulness in the meditators, but not the control group. The 5 aspects of mindfulness were observing, describing, acting with awareness, non-judging of inner experiences, and non-reactivity to inner experiences. So the conclusions here will represent an underlying brain mechanism associated with mindfulness-based improvements in mental health, according to this. And, of course, the recommendations for additional studies. Now, we've come a long way in the fact that science is even willing to look at these things seriously. And since we're running out of time, we're going to take a look next week at an area where science is only just beginning to maybe take this area seriously, and that's the area of research into psychic ability. And we'll be talking about one of the leaders in that field, a man by the name of Dean Radin, and the controversy around him. And I think we'll probably continue on to talk a little bit more about David Houlet's predictions for the future. There are many and very interesting. Just to leave you with this as we're wrapping up the show, another study, and this is on Dr. Weil's website. This is a study from Harvard that showed that the most consistent positive influence on health and well-being is the strength of relationships with friends and family, making meaningful connections. So, meaningful connections seem to be important in having a healthful state of mind. And when you have a healthful state of mind, you also feel quite wealthy because you feel like you have